The rain hammered against the steel walls of Unit 7 like angry fists. It was 2:17 a.m., and Private Maya Delacroix sat alone in the dimmed maintenance bay, her fingers working methodically through a tangle of copper wiring. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered, casting strange shadows across rows of silent machinery. She'd been assigned the graveyard shift for 3 weeks now, ever since she'd filed that complaint about Sergeant Frank Holloway. Nobody told her directly that this was punishment, but everyone knew. In the military, you didn't challenge a superior officer and expect things to stay the same. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Maya was small for a soldier, barely meeting the height requirement. With dark hair she kept tightly braided and eyes that seemed too gentle for someone in uniform. She'd grown up in a trailer park outside of Memphis, the youngest of 5 kids, and the army had been her ticket out. Her hands, small and nimble, had always been good with delicate work. That's why they'd put her in electronics repair, fixing the communication arrays that kept the entire base connected to command. She was good at her job, maybe the best they had, though nobody seemed to care about that anymore. The door to the bay slammed open with a bang that echoed through the cavernous space. Maya didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could smell the cigarette smoke and cheap whiskey that always clung to Sergeant Holloway like a second skin. He was a large man, over 6 feet tall with a beer gut that strained against his uniform buttons. His face was perpetually red, whether from anger or alcohol nobody could quite tell. He'd been in the service for 22 years, and he wore those years like armor, believing they gave him the right to treat the lower ranks however he pleased. Behind him came 3 of his usual crew: Corporal James Dixon, Private First Class Anthony Russo, and Specialist Kevin Hammond. They were younger than Holloway, but cut from the same cloth, the kind of men who found power in making others feel small. Maya had seen them operate before, had watched them corner other female soldiers in the mess hall, making crude jokes and standing just a little too close. She'd told herself she'd never be one of their targets. She'd been wrong. Maya Delacroix, still think you're special, don't you? Holloway's voice cut through the quiet hum of machinery. His words came out slurred at the edges. Maya kept her eyes on the wiring in front of her, her heart beginning to pound harder in her chest. She'd learned that engaging with him only made things worse. The complaint she'd filed had been about him showing up drunk to duty, about him berating a new recruit until the kid had broken down crying. She'd thought she was doing the right thing. She'd thought someone would care. "I'm just doing my work, Sergeant," Maya said quietly, keeping her voice steady even as her hands began to tremble slightly. She reached for her wire cutters, focusing on the task in front of her. In her peripheral vision, she could see the 4 men spreading out, forming a semicircle that blocked her path to the exit. The maintenance bay suddenly felt much smaller than it had moments before. "Your work?" Holloway laughed, and the others joined in like trained dogs. "Your work is whatever I say it is, Private, and right now I think your work is learning some respect." He moved closer and Maya could see the glassy shine in his eyes.
He'd been drinking heavily, more than usual.
Something had set him off tonight, made him meaner than normal. Maybe he'd heard that her complaint was actually being reviewed. Maybe he was scared. Scared men were dangerous men. Maya stood up slowly, setting down her tools. She was aware of every exit, every potential weapon within reach. The army had taught her hand-to-hand combat, but she was realistic about her chances against 4 men, especially with Holloway outweighing her by at least 100 pounds. Her mind raced through options. She could scream, but Unit 7 was on the far edge of the base, isolated from the main buildings. The skeleton crew working the night shift wouldn't hear her. Her radio was clipped to her belt, but Holloway was already too close. "Sergeant, I don't want any trouble," Maya said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I just want to finish this repair and get back to my barracks." She tried to step to the side to create some distance, but Russo moved to block her path. He was grinning, enjoying this. They all were. This was entertainment for them, a way to break up the monotony of a Thursday night shift. "See? That's your problem, Delacroix," Holloway said, jabbing a thick finger toward her face. "You think you can just do whatever you want, file complaints, make me look bad in front of command, act like you're better than everyone else." His voice was rising now, spittle flying from his lips. "You need to learn your place. You need to understand how things really work around here." Maya's military training kicked in. She kept her body loose, ready to move. Her eyes tracked Holloway's hands, watching for the first sign of aggression. She'd been in tough situations before. Growing up in the trailer park, she'd learned to fight off handsy boyfriends of her mother's, had learned to protect her younger siblings from neighborhood bullies. But this felt different. This felt organized, premeditated. These men had come here with a purpose. Maybe we should just talk about this in the morning, Maya tried, her voice firmer now. When everyone's had some rest and we can think clearly. She was stalling, hoping someone would come, hoping for any interruption. The base ran 24 hours. Surely someone would need something from the maintenance bay. But even as she thought it, she knew it was unlikely. Holloway had probably chosen this location and time specifically because he knew they'd be alone. Holloway's face twisted into something ugly. Talk, he spat. I'm done talking with you. You want to act like a soldier? Let's see how tough you really are. He lunged forward with surprising speed for a drunk man, grabbing for Maya's arm. She jerked backward, her training taking over. She twisted away from his grip, but Hammond was suddenly there, shoving her hard from behind. Maya stumbled forward directly into Holloway's reach. His hand clamped down on her shoulder like a vice, fingers digging in painfully. Maya drove her elbow back into Hammond's stomach, heard him grunt in pain. She stomped down hard on Holloway's instep, and his grip loosened just enough for her to wrench free. But there were 4 of them and only one of her. As she spun away, Dixon caught her from the side, his arm wrapping around her neck in a chokehold. Maya clawed at his arm, gasping for air. The fluorescent lights above seemed to pulse and swim in her vision. Think you're so smart, Dixon hissed in her ear. Let's see how smart you are now. Maya threw her head back, connecting with his nose. She heard the crunch of cartilage, heard him howl in pain. His arm loosened and she broke free, stumbling forward. But her lungs were burning. Her vision spotty from the lack of oxygen. She wasn't moving fast enough. That's when Holloway's boot caught her in the side of the head. The world exploded into white light and pain. Maya felt herself falling, felt the cold concrete floor rushing up to meet her. The impact drove the remaining air from her lungs. She tasted blood, wasn't sure if it was from her mouth or her nose. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound. She tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. They felt like they belonged to someone else, distant and unresponsive. Through the haze of pain and shock, Maya was aware of the men standing over her. She could see their boots, scuffed and muddy, arranged in a circle around where she lay. Someone was talking, maybe Holloway, but the words were muffled and strange, like she was hearing them from underwater. She tried to focus, tried to hold on to consciousness, but it kept slipping away like water through her fingers. Her last clear thought before the darkness took her was a memory of her little brother, Danny, who she'd protected from bullies back home. She'd always been the strong one, the fighter, the one who didn't back down. She'd promised Danny she'd come home a hero, some hero she'd turned out to be, bleeding on a maintenance bay floor while her attackers stood over her and laughed. Maya didn't know how long she was unconscious. It could have been seconds or hours. When awareness slowly crept back, the first thing she registered was the pain. Her head felt like it had been split open, a throbbing agony that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. Her right eye was swollen shut and she could feel something warm and wet trickling down the side of her face. Blood, probably. She tried to move and immediately regretted it as waves of nausea rolled through her. The maintenance bay was silent now except for the ever-present hum of machinery and the steady patter of rain on the roof. The men were gone. Maya forced her working eye open and stared up at the flickering fluorescent lights. She needed to move, needed to get help, but her body felt like it was made of lead. Every breath sent sharp pains shooting through her ribs. Holloway's boot had done more damage than just the kick to her head. With enormous effort, Maya rolled onto her side. The movement made her stomach heave and she vomited onto the concrete floor, gasping and shaking. She lay there for a moment, gathering what little strength she had left. Her radio. She needed her radio. Her trembling hand moved to her belt, fingers fumbling for the device. It was gone. They'd taken it. Of course they had. They'd thought of everything. Maya began to crawl. It was humiliating, dragging herself across the floor like a wounded animal, leaving a smeared trail of blood behind her. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. The nearest phone was mounted on the wall by the bay entrance, about 30 feet away. It might as well have been 30 miles. Each movement was agony, each inch forward a victory. She'd made it about halfway when she heard voices outside. Male voices, For a terrifying moment, she thought Holloway and his crew had come back to finish the job. Maya froze, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. But then she heard other voices, unfamiliar ones, and the sound of vehicles pulling up outside. Heavy vehicles, multiple engines. That wasn't normal for 2:30 in the morning. The bay door burst open, and suddenly the space was flooded with light and people. Maya squinted against the brightness, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Men in crisp uniforms, not the standard issue she was used to seeing around the base. These uniforms were different, decorated with more ribbons and insignia than she'd ever seen on one person. And the bearing of these men, the way they moved with absolute authority, told her these weren't regular soldiers. The first man through the door was older, maybe 55, with steel gray hair cut military short, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. 3 stars gleamed on his collar. A lieutenant general. Maya's foggy brain struggled to process this. What was a lieutenant general doing at Unit 7 at 2:30 in the morning? Behind him came 2 more officers, both with 2 stars. Major generals. And behind them, a full security team. The lieutenant general's eyes swept the maintenance bay and stopped when they found Maya lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Something changed in his expression, a hardening that made him look suddenly much more dangerous. He crossed the space between them in long strides, dropping to one knee beside her with a grace that belied his age. His name tag read General Marcus Blackwood, Private Delacroix. His voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "Stay still. Medical is right behind us. You're going to be okay." He'd said her name. He knew who she was. How did a 3-star general know the name of a private first-class electronics technician? Maya tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Her working eye moved past Blackwood to the other officers spreading through the bay. They were examining everything, taking photographs, speaking in low, urgent tones into their radios. One of the major generals, a woman with sharp features and darker skin, approached. Her name tag identified her as General Patricia Okonkwo. She looked down at Maya with an expression that mixed fury and sorrow in equal measure. "Where are they, Private?" Okonkwo asked. "The men who did this to you. Where did they go?" Maya tried to answer, but her throat was too swollen. She lifted a shaking hand and pointed vaguely toward the north side of the base where the barracks were located. Okonkwo nodded once, then turned to her security team. "Find Sergeant Frank Holloway, Corporal James Dixon, Private First Class Anthony Russo, and Specialist Kevin Hammond. I want them in custody in the next 5 minutes." No exceptions. The security team moved out like a well-oiled machine, speaking rapidly into their radios. The 3rd general, a man with weathered features and a slight limp, was examining the area where the attack had occurred. His name tag read General Vincent Shaw. He studied the scuff marks on the floor, the scattered tools, the small spots of blood that marked Maya's crawling path across the concrete. He photographed everything with a professional camera, his movements methodical and precise. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a crime scene investigation. Medics rushed in with a stretcher, their hands gentle as they examined Maya's injuries. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, spoke softly to her as he worked. "You're going to be fine, Private. We're taking good care of you. Just try to stay calm." They fitted a neck brace, checked her pupils, started an IV line. Maya let them work, too exhausted and hurt to do anything else. But her mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. General Blackwood stayed beside her the entire time, his presence solid and reassuring. As the medics prepared to load her onto the stretcher, he leaned in close. "Private Delacroix, I need you to listen carefully. What happened here tonight was not your fault. Do you understand me? This was not your fault. The men who did this will face justice. I give you my word." There was something in his eyes, a fierce protectiveness that Maya didn't understand but desperately wanted to believe in. They loaded her onto the stretcher, and as they carried her toward the waiting ambulance, Maya caught glimpses of what was happening outside. The entire area had been locked down. Military police vehicles surrounded Unit 7, their lights painting the rainy night in shades of red and blue. Soldiers were being lined up, questioned. The whole base seemed to have been woken up and mobilized. This wasn't standard procedure for an assault on a single private. This was something much bigger. As they lifted her into the ambulance, Maya saw 4 men being led out of the barracks in handcuffs. Even through her swollen eye and pain-fogged brain, she recognized them. Holloway, Dixon, Russo, Hammond. They looked confused, scared even. Holloway was shouting something, demanding to know what was happening, invoking his rights. But the military police weren't listening. They handled the 4 men with rough efficiency, loading them into separate vehicles. The ambulance doors closed, cutting off Maya's view. The medics worked over her, checking vitals, cleaning wounds. One of them, an older woman with gray streaks in her hair, held Maya's hand. "You're safe now, honey," she said softly. "Those men can't hurt you anymore." Maya wanted to believe her, wanted to feel safe, but she'd learned the hard way that the military protected its own. And she was just a private who'd made the mistake of filing a complaint. The ambulance ride to the base hospital passed in a blur of pain and confusion. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of radio chatter between the medics and the hospital. Words like concussion, possible skull fracture, multiple contusions, assault. When they wheeled her into the emergency room, it was full of activity despite the early morning hour. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her, their movements practiced and efficient. A doctor with tired eyes and gentle hands examined her carefully. "I'm Dr. Helen Price," she said. "You've got a severe concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and significant facial trauma. We're going to do a CT scan to make sure there's no brain bleed, then get you admitted for observation. You were very lucky, Private. A kick to the head like that could have killed you." Maya wasn't sure she felt lucky, but she didn't have the energy to argue. They took her for the CT scan, the machine whirring and clicking as it captured images of her injured brain. Then they moved her to a private room, something else that struck Maya as unusual. Privates didn't get private rooms. They got stuck in the general ward with a dozen other soldiers. But here she was in a quiet room with her own bathroom and a door that closed. Outside that door, she could see 2 military police officers standing guard. Protecting her or keeping her contained? She wasn't sure which. Maya must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes again, pale morning light was filtering through the window. The rain had stopped, leaving everything washed clean and new. She felt marginally better, though her head still throbbed and every movement sent pain shooting through her ribs. A nurse came in to check her vitals, offering a kind smile and some water. Maya drank gratefully, her throat raw and dry. She was still processing the strange events of the night when the door opened again and General Blackwood entered. He looked exactly as he had hours earlier, his uniform crisp and perfect, his bearing commanding. But his eyes were softer now as he pulled a chair up beside her bed. He sat down heavily as if he'd been awake all night, which he probably had. "How are you feeling, Private?" he asked. The question seemed genuine, not just perfunctory. Maya considered lying, saying she was fine, but something about his direct gaze made her tell the truth. "Like I got kicked in the head by a 200-pound sergeant," she croaked. Blackwood's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Fair enough. Dr. Price says you're going to make a full recovery. That's good news." There was a moment of silence and Maya gathered her courage. "Sir," she said, her voice stronger now, "can I ask what's going on? Why are you here? Why are 3 generals investigating an assault on a private? I mean, I'm grateful, but I don't understand. This doesn't make sense." Blackwood nodded slowly as if he'd been expecting the question. "Private Delacroix, what I'm about to tell you is classified information. Do you understand what that means?" Maya nodded carefully, mindful of her injuries. "It means if you share it with anyone without authorization, you'll face court-martial. But you deserve to know the truth, and frankly, you've earned the right to hear it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping lower. 3 months ago, we received intelligence about a trafficking operation running through several military bases. Not drug trafficking, human trafficking. Specifically, female soldiers who were being assaulted, threatened, and in some cases forcibly transferred to overseas positions where they would disappear into private contractor operations. These women were being sold, Private. Sold like property to the highest bidder. Maya felt her blood run cold. The room suddenly seemed much darker. "We've been investigating quietly," Blackwood continued, "trying to identify the network, trace the connections. We knew there was a ring operating out of this base, but we didn't know who was involved. Then, 4 weeks ago, your complaint about Sergeant Holloway landed on the desk of one of our investigators. It fit the pattern we'd been seeing. A male superior, usually with a drinking problem and a history of violence targeting isolated female soldiers. We started monitoring Holloway and his associates. That's why you were put on graveyard shifts," Maya realized. "You were using me as bait." Blackwood had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Yes, and I apologize for that. We had agents watching you, but we were maintaining distance to avoid tipping off Holloway. We thought we had more time. We didn't expect him to escalate to physical violence so quickly." When our surveillance team saw them enter the maintenance bay, we mobilized immediately. By the time we got there, the assault had already happened. That's on me, Private. I should have pulled you out sooner. Maya's head was spinning, and not just from the concussion. She'd been part of an investigation and hadn't even known it. Her assault, her pain, had been a calculated risk in a larger operation. Part of her wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at Blackwood for using her like a pawn, but another part understood the cold logic of it. If they'd pulled her out, Holloway would have gotten suspicious. Other women would have been targeted instead, and the trafficking ring would have continued operating. What happens now? She asked. Blackwood's expression hardened. Now we dismantle the entire network. Holloway and his 3 accomplices were just the bottom rung. We've already arrested 6 other soldiers on this base, including a major who was coordinating the transfers. We have evidence linking this ring to similar operations on 7 other bases. By the end of the week, we'll have taken down over 40 people. This is the biggest military corruption case in 20 years. And your complaint, your courage in speaking up despite knowing it would make you a target, that's what broke it open. He stood up, straightening his uniform. You're being transferred, Private Delacroix. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to the Pentagon, working directly under General Okonkwo in the Communications Security Division. It's a promotion, with a raise and all the benefits that come with it. You've earned it, and frankly, you're too valuable to waste on maintenance work. You'll also be placed in protective custody until the trials are complete. We can't take any chances that someone connected to this ring might try to retaliate. Maya tried to process this information. A promotion? A transfer to the Pentagon? It felt surreal, like she'd fallen asleep and woken up in someone else's life. But what about my testimony, she asked. Won't I need to be here for the court-martial? Blackwood shook his head. The court-martial will be handled by a special tribunal. You'll testify via secure video link. Everything will be recorded and documented. Holloway and the others will spend the rest of their lives in military prison, Private. I promise you that. He moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, you remind me of my daughter. She's about your age, just finished basic training. I think about her out there in the world, wearing the uniform, trusting that her fellow soldiers will protect her. What happened to you should never happen. Not to you, not to anyone, but especially not to someone who had the courage to stand up and do the right thing. Thank you for your service, Private Delacroix. The real kind of service, the kind that matters. Then he was gone, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and her pain. She stared at the ceiling, watching patterns in the acoustic tiles, trying to make sense of everything. Her life had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours. She'd been assaulted, nearly killed, and now she was apparently a key witness in a major military investigation. The girl from the Memphis trailer park was going to the Pentagon. Over the next few days, as Maya recovered in the hospital, the full scope of the trafficking operation came to light. Generals Blackwood, Okonkwo, and Shaw had been working on this investigation for over a year, following threads that connected dozens of military bases across the country and overseas. The ring had been operating for at least 5 years, with over 100 women victimized. Some had been forced into situations they couldn't escape. Others had simply disappeared, their families told they'd deserted or been killed in action. Maya gave her testimony from the hospital bed, speaking to military investigators who recorded every word. She told them about the assault, about the months of harassment that preceded it, about the culture of fear and silence that allowed men like Holloway to operate with impunity. It was exhausting, reliving those moments, but also cathartic. For the first time, people were actually listening to her. Her words had power. The news of the investigation and arrests spread through the base like wildfire. Some soldiers were shocked, unable to believe that such things could happen in their ranks. Others weren't surprised at all. They'd seen the warning signs, heard the rumors, but had stayed silent out of fear or apathy. Maya received visits from several female soldiers she barely knew, women who thanked her quietly for speaking up, who shared their own stories of harassment and assault. Each story was a wound, a reminder of how badly the system had failed them all. 2 weeks after the assault, Maya was discharged from the hospital. True to his word, General Blackwood had arranged her transfer. She was given a new uniform with new rank insignia, specialist instead of private, and a plane ticket to Washington. The promotion came with a significant pay increase and a housing allowance that would let her send money home to help her family. Her mother cried when Maya called to tell her about the new assignment. proud and relieved in equal measure. The day before she left, Maya visited Unit 7 one last time. The maintenance bay had been cleaned, all traces of that terrible night erased. New soldiers worked at the stations where she'd once sat, repairing equipment and testing circuits. They didn't know what had happened here, didn't know about the blood on the floor or the violence in the darkness. Maybe that was for the best. The base was trying to move forward, trying to heal. Maya stood in the spot where Holloway had kicked her, where she'd lain bleeding and alone. She waited to feel something, fear or anger or sorrow, but all she felt was a strange emptiness. That girl who'd been attacked was gone, replaced by someone harder and more aware. The innocence she'd brought to the military, the belief that doing the right thing would be rewarded, had been beaten out of her on this floor. What remained was colder, more practical. She would serve her country, would do her duty, but she would never again trust blindly. The trials began 3 months after Maya arrived in Washington. She testified via video link, as promised, speaking calmly and clearly about the events of that night. Holloway sat in the courtroom, smaller somehow in his prison jumpsuit, his face slack and defeated. He wouldn't meet her eyes. None of them would. Dixon, Russo, Hammond, they all looked away when she spoke as if her words physically hurt them. Good. They deserved to hurt. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Security footage from cameras Maya hadn't known existed showed everything. Her crawling across the floor. The men standing over her. Holloway's boot connecting with her head. There were also recordings of conversations, plans for what they'd intended to do after the beating. Maya learned during the trial that she'd been scheduled for an emergency transfer to a base in Afghanistan, a transfer that would have placed her directly in the hands of the trafficking ring's overseas operators. If Holloway hadn't lost control, if he'd stuck to the plan instead of letting his rage take over, Maya would have disappeared just like the other women. All 4 men were found guilty on multiple charges, including assault, conspiracy, human trafficking, and conduct unbecoming. Holloway received 30 years in military prison without possibility of parole. The others got between 15 and 20 years. The major who'd been coordinating the transfers got life. In total, 43 soldiers across 7 bases were convicted and imprisoned. The trafficking ring was dismantled, its operations shut down permanently. Maya watched the sentencing via video link, sitting in General Okonkwo's office at the Pentagon. When the judge read out Holloway's sentence, she waited to feel satisfaction or justice or closure. But again, there was only emptiness. No amount of prison time would undo what had been done. The women who'd been trafficked, who'd disappeared or died, they weren't coming back. The system that had allowed this to happen for 5 years wasn't fixed just because some bad actors had been removed. There was still so much work to do, but that work had become her mission. Under Okonkwo's mentorship, Maya threw herself into improving military communication security, particularly systems designed to protect whistleblowers and assault victims. She helped design protocols that would make it easier for soldiers to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. She testified before congressional committees about the need for better oversight and accountability. The girl from the trailer park became a voice for change, whether she wanted to be or not. Years passed. Maya rose through the ranks, earning her sergeant's stripes and then her commission as an officer. She never forgot that night in the maintenance bay, never forgot the feeling of concrete against her face or the taste of her own blood, but she learned to carry it differently, to transform her pain into purpose. She became the kind of officer she'd needed that night, the kind who listened and believed and took action. On the 10th anniversary of the assault, Maya returned to the base where it had happened. She was a captain now with her own command, respect earned through years of dedicated service. She stood once again in Unit 7's maintenance bay, but this time she wasn't alone. With her were a dozen female soldiers, all of them survivors of assault or harassment, all of them part of a new support network she'd helped establish. They'd come to install a memorial plaque, something to remember the women who hadn't survived, who'd been lost to the trafficking ring, or driven to desperation by a system that failed them. The plaque bore no names, just a simple inscription that Maya had written herself. For those who spoke truth in dark places, you are not forgotten. General Blackwood attended the ceremony, older now and considering retirement, but his eyes still sharp and kind. He shook Maya's hand firmly, pride evident in his expression. After the ceremony, as the others filed out, Maya stood alone in the bay once more. The machinery hummed its endless song. Rain pattered against the roof just like that night so long ago. But this time Maya wasn't afraid. She'd faced the darkness and survived. She'd been kicked down but had risen stronger. The scars remained, physical and emotional, but they were proof of her resilience, her refusal to be broken. Maya's hand moved to her pocket, pulling out the set of dog tags she'd been issued that night 10 years ago. The metal was worn now, the edges smooth from years of handling. She'd kept them as a reminder, a tangible link to the person she'd been before everything changed. That frightened private who just wanted to do good work and serve her country. That girl was gone, but her memory lived on in every soldier Maya helped, every policy she changed, every life she protected. As Maya turned to leave Unit 7 for the last time, she allowed herself a small smile. The maintenance bay would always be the place where she'd nearly died, but it was also the place where she'd been reborn, where she'd learned that justice, real justice, required more than just good intentions. It required action, sacrifice, and the courage to stand up even when standing up meant becoming a target. 3 generals had arrived that night and shut down the unit, but Maya had done something even more important. She'd refused to be silenced. And in refusing, she'd saved countless others from the same fate. The rain followed her out into the night, washing clean the old ghosts, making room for new beginnings. Maya Delacroix walked away from Unit 7 with her head held high, a survivor who'd become a warrior, a victim who'd transformed into a voice. Her story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning.